All right, well, I think we can get started. How does it sound to everybody to get started? Fantastic. Thank you for coming today. I know the keynote speaker is across the way, so all of the people in this room have made the decision to talk about hospitality. So thank you very much for coming and talking about hospitality. How many people in the room are in the hospitality industry? Okay, we've got one person. How many people in the room have been in the hospitality industry before at any level? Boy, that looks like America right there, right? We're the training ground of America. Is that why you're here? Because you understand that there are a lot of transferable skills that happen in the hospitality industry. My first job was in hospitality. How many people's first job was in hospitality? Right, exactly. So let's remember that. Couple things. This is the end of a lot of learning for all of you. I normally do either like a half an hour or 45-minute presentations, or I do 3-day presentations, right? I was just talking to, no 3-day presentation, right? Although maybe sometime in the future we have a 3-day presentation, but we'll talk about that afterwards, right? But because it's the end of the day, and because I've gone through this presentation a number of times, and each time it's been wildly different in how long it's taken me to give it, I'm just going to go through the presentation. If we start to get near 4:30, that means I've been talking too much, right? And you can give me feedback. If it ends before 4:30, raise your hand if you're okay if it ends before 4:30. There we go, right? So today, and is this working? Let's make sure it is. Okay, what are we going to talk about today? It's a good question. We're going to talk about how much a bald man can sweat right on the top of his head while his presentation doesn't work, right? So my usual goals are to come somewhere, to come into a region. I've been hired by the National Restaurant Association to literally, and this is my favorite thing to say when they hired me, they said, we need a workforce development thought cowboy. That's the truth. That's what my VP said when she called me, and I said, I don't know what that means, but I would like to be that. And so they allowed me to be that. And what that means is that I go to different regions of the country. I stick my nose into that region. In Alaska, I called a help desk at the DOL, and I said, what are you doing for hospitality workforce development? And the poor woman on the other end said, I don't know, but maybe you should speak with Martha. Right? And then she connected me to Martha, and Martha connected me with so on and so on and so on. And in the case of Alaska, we ended up with the governor, and we're working on the Alaska Hospitality Youth Education Project, right? But that's what I'm supposed to do, come in and say, who are you and what do you do? And oftentimes people say, I don't want to talk with you, I don't want to talk about hospitality, right? But sometimes I get the right champions in the room, so I'm hoping that happens today. What's our goal today? Well, when I talked with Georgia, and when this organization called and said, we'd like you to come down and talk about hospitality workforce development, I said, who's the audience, right? How many people are in workforce development? How many people in VR? How many people in educational frameworks? How many people in CTE, right? You're my people, right? This is who I want to talk to. People who are trying to create meaningful impact, right? Using hospitality careers as a way to create upward economic mobility for people, as a way to create a transition for people, or in my case, a lifelong career that you'll find out later when I brag about myself, where it's taken me and what I've been able to do, right, with very little education in the beginning, with very little illumination, right, but hospitality has allowed me to have an incredible career. If I can work with some of you as champions to do that for some people in Oregon, that would be fantastic. So that's really my goal today. But what Georgia said was, could you meet with this group of people and set up a statewide system of hospitality workforce development where everybody is connected? And I said, well, that's going to take longer than an hour and a half. And it's the last session. What we can do is we can talk about it. We can put a few things on the menu. I'll talk really fast like I normally do. And what I'm hoping is some of what you hear today you're already going to know, right? I'll be mansplaining to you. I'll be looking to see that mansplaining look. That just happened to me recently in Texas. A whole room was like this. I was like, I'm just not getting it. So if I see that happening today, I understand, right? But there may be stuff where you go, you know, everything David said, it was that one thing that he said, I'm going to write that down. I'm going to get back in touch with him. I'm going to put him in touch with people so that we can do that cowboy thing, start riding horses together and create meaningful impact, whatever that means, right? Because it means something different for everybody in the room. Now, when Georgia called me and said we want to build a system, she also said she wanted it to be meaningfully connected, right? And I think as we work in workforce development, and I can say hospitality is the, I don't know what the politically correct thing to say is, the black sheep or whatever, but like when you talk with workforce development, you say, hi, I'm from hospitality, they're like, right? Dishwashers, we're going to go talk with STEM. This is my buddy from Amazon, right? So, how do we meaningfully connect people in the workforce development system so that we're creating meaningful impact for people, right? We want to share operational capacity. When I come in as a cowboy, really what I'm doing is like, what can you do? We can do this, we have shoes, I can get alarm clocks, right? We have scheduling. David has some great training and professional development. You have network, right? How do we connect that in a meaningful way across organizations? And that's when I like to underline, circle, put in like, how hard is it to meet people from other organizations, find out what their strategic plan is, and then tell them that you want to train dishwashers, right? It's a model that we have to build. It's a powerful model. I can't tell you how many dishwashers, right, who had mentors who said, we're going to help you out here, right, who have had great careers. So, why call the NRA? Why did you call the NRA? I always put that up there like this because I love it. I ask all of the conferences to put NRA on my name tag because you go to National Association of Workforce Development Boards in DC, and people come up, they're like, oh, it's nice to meet you. I'm like, you're the NRA. What are you doing in the Workforce Development Office? Right? But everybody knows it's the National Restaurant Association. Some people get really into it. They're like, you're from the NRA. I got 3 people I'd like you to shoot at this conference. So I'm not that NRA, right? But why did they call me? They called me because we attract people, right? This state has an incredibly powerful state restaurant association, right? I work with the state restaurant associations in 48 different states. Oregon is top, right? Their CEO is top. Their education foundation is top. They have workforce development professionals inside of their hospitality association. They're trying, right? So if you leave with one thing, know that the Oregon State Restaurant Association and Hospitality Association brings it, right? I work with other associations who don't bring it, like Oregon does sometimes, right? But what are they doing? They're empowering, right? And they're advancing people in the state of Oregon, right? And they're doing that through hospitality advocacy, right? They're doing that through hospitality professional development, and that's where I play a role, right? And they're also doing that by networking in the community. If you train your constituents and they have the KSAs that they need to really succeed in hospitality, but you don't know the association, you don't know the members, you don't know the businesses that are looking to provide what kind of jobs? Good jobs, right? If you don't know those people, it's very difficult to finally come to the end of that model and do what we're supposed to do. So, a question, is there a need for systematic hospitality workforce development? Yes?
Yes.
Yes? Yes? I heard someone go, yes, like they're serious about it. I like that, I want your card, right? Let's look at some numbers, right? When people talk to me about hospitality workforce development, first of all, I'm a white, male, American, middle-aged dude to come in there like, here to speak for that group. Do you speak for the groups and the constituents that we care about in workforce development, right? I don't really need a leg up as a white, male, American. I know this is somewhat dangerous things to say, but I've lived my whole life as a white, male, American, right? And I've also worked in tandem with opportunity populations, right? I can tell you as a restaurant manager who has managed restaurants around the world, I counted the other day, 33 different nationalities I've managed, right? Not everybody in hospitality looks like me. I can fly through these right now, but in race and ethnicity, we are the industry that employs immigrants when they come to the country. We are the industry that works with justice-impacted individuals. We are the industry where women hold a significantly higher management grade, right, than all the other industries. I had a bunch of charts. I'm a ChatGPT guy now. Does anybody use ChatGPT? You should be. Right? Boy, does it make me look smart. Right? Put a spreadsheet in there and say, could you give me some graphs that make me look smart? And it answers back, these should make you look smart, right? I didn't put them up here. But this is why I'm dealing with workforce development, because we know that the hospitality industry. Well, I'll use Gavin. Has anybody ever eaten at the Anthony's in Bend, Oregon? Mm-hmm. Right? Gavin was the executive chef there. I hired Gavin 7 days out of a 4-year prison term, right, that he went through as a youth, and he begged me for a dishwasher job. He was the executive chef when he went there, right? So we are this industry that's looking at opportunity populations, but our managers don't have the expertise that you have, right? So you play a real role in bringing that pipeline into our industry, making sure that they have the right information and professional development, and then our industry will do our job as mentors, right, as managers, all the things that we've been doing for years and years and years. So I won't bore you with that. But is there a need for systematic hospitality workforce development? Is it needed in Oregon? Can one person tell me why you say yes, it's needed in Oregon?
Well, I'm from a county, a coastal county, that, where tourism is a very large and important sector. And we have trouble hiring people because they're just not enough. Well, we have an unemployment rate of 3.1% or something, so.
Right, but there's not enough people pipelined
There
into
is
the industry, and when they come into the industry, do they have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to
No.
represent
That's one.
coastal Oregon?
No, that's one, and one of the big issues for us is that because hospitality is so frowned upon, even in our own community, where half of our employers are in the hospitality business, we have a reputation that we have. I'm a county commissioner, I sit on board with Fox County Commission. Every year at budget time, I have to fight like a monster to get some of our county funds to fund our tourism promotion industry, because my other county commissioners said, well, no, we want to cut down trees, we want to support the forestry industry. Of course, the more trees we cut down, the less trees we cut down. That's just.
So let's make sure you and I talk and we look at some real numbers about what in coastal Oregon, what's being contributed by hospitality dollars, right? And if we want to do a tit for tat, how much of our public dollars do we put in supporting how big a part of the pie graph of the economy? I don't ever want to point fingers at anybody, but I do want to point fingers at that graph that you're talking about and tell people to look at it, right? Because that story is something that we need to talk about in workforce development. I am telling you, I am the least attractive person at any workforce development, anything I do, right? I made the joke about Amazon, well, guess who's right behind Amazon, Microsoft? I live up in Seattle, right? I'm like third in line and people usually just hand me their plates, right? So I understand that, but we are a powerhouse economically. I mean, I could give this entire presentation on the dollars that we bring to your regional economies. But workforce development remembers, and I'm going to be a little rude here, right? I had a job as a dishwasher when I was 16 and it blew. Yeah, right? All jobs straight out of high school are tough. And you learn, right? So, but that narrative follows hospitality, and it's a dangerous narrative, and I'll tell you why it's dangerous. Because if that narrative had appealed to me, Gavin wouldn't be paying a mortgage, be putting his kids through college, or be the executive chef at Anthony's, right? So if you take away another statement though, examine your own narrative about hospitality and your involvement with hospitality workforce development, right? So I may be going slow here, right? All of these areas are important in rural areas. Is hospitality workforce development important in rural areas? I hear all the time that it's not, it's a rural area. Of course it is. We are a rural area out here on the coast. Right, if you go up the coast of Washington State, same thing. It's the same group of people talking about the same thing, right? It's pivotal to these coastal areas. But your commissioners and people who are holding the purse strings need to hear a different narrative, right? So, what are the challenges? Restaurant readiness is a huge challenge in rural areas, also in urban areas, right? When I used to hire people I used to manage the Anthony's up in Olympia for a time, right? And I had people who would come in with their pants almost literally on backwards, right? And so part of a statewide system is restaurant readiness, employment readiness. I know that makes a lot of sense to workforce development. If hospitality, restaurant readiness, lodging readiness, job readiness is something that you think there's a space for in your workspace, in your workforce development system, you should definitely come get a card from me, because we can connect you to our national systems. We can connect you to the state restaurant association system that works with restaurant ready, right? So in high schools, is there hospitality workforce development needed in high schools?
Yes.
Needed. Does everybody in this room know about the ProStart program? Right, the ProStart program was a program that was invented in the 1990s to sort of attack the same sort of job workforce issues that we've had post-pandemic. And now, I believe we have over 100,000 students being educated in the CTE program, right? That's in high schools across the country. We have 33 high schools in Washington State. Does anybody know how many high schools in Oregon? It's a similar number, many high schools. It's an incredible thing. Here's the next sticky note I want you to take. The ProStart Invitational is an amazing cooking competition that happens on the state level. If you ever have a chance to go to the ProStart Invitational, you will see high school teams using 2 Bunsen burners cooking 5-star meals, right? I was an executive on arguably the world's most exclusive 5-star cruise ship for a time, right? I know what 5-star means, I know what 5-star meals are supposed to taste like, and ProStar does it. Why is ProStar important to this group? Are there any transition directors in here, right? ProStar plays a big role in helping students who are coming out of high school, who maybe have that ProStar certificate of achievement, move in to the economy and into the workforce. And we work a lot with ProStar teachers who meet with people like you who talk about how do we take those kids and put them into the economy through the ProStar program. I will tell you this, as a restaurant manager of a steakhouse that did $5 million a year, right? If you walked in the room and said, I have a ProStar certificate of achievement, the interview was over, right? So that's something to think about if you're in educational frameworks as well. This program also, the Foundations program also exists in community colleges and also in what we call non-traditional ProStar spaces. So it is something to think about if you're involved with high school students in workforce development. In colleges and community colleges, this is my toughest space, right? What are the challenges in a community college? There's a million challenges in getting workforce to develop and hospitality to develop in community colleges, right? Is there a need in deaf and hard of hearing programs? Is there a need for hospitality workforce development? Check this out. Last month, I baked cookies with the Center for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Youth out of Vancouver, Washington, at Junior Achievement BizTown, and we took 144 deaf and hard of hearing students, we divided them into 7 groups, and I walked them through baking cookies. For many of them, it was the first time they'd ever had their hands on ingredients, right? Ever done any cooking, right? It was ever used a spatula, right? It was an amazing, amazing experience. We're going to do it again next year. If there are people in VR working with deaf and hard of hearing community, or communities with intellectually disabled students, I would love to talk with you about what we do for hospitality workforce development for those opportunity populations. That's been incredibly empowering, right? For youth, of course, there's a need, right? For foster care, I go up to Alaska about 3 times a year. We have a cohort, you'll see them later if I make it to that point in this presentation, of about 40 kids who have just come out of foster care. And we bring them in for, that's what I was talking about, the 3-day boot camp. I'll show that a little bit here if I get to it. But we bring them in, we give them front of the house skills, back of the house skills, some fundamental business skills, and they leave with a passel of knowledge, right, that allows them to go out and interview well. But that's not all we do. At the same time, we teach them interview and resume skills. And then in the case of Alaska, we do a statewide virtual job fair. And it's been amazing. It's been amazing. I remember one guy, Glenn. I said, Glenn, he was from, can I remember the name of this village? New Haven. Yeah. This is a very small village in Alaska. And I said, Glenn, what would you like to do in hospitality? You chose through your case manager to come to this hospitality boot camp. What would you like to do? And I'm expecting a chef, whatever. He says, well, I'd like to be a plumber. Right? He's been a plumber at Homer Spit Resort for the last 3 years, right? And the only reason I bring that up is because as we introduce whatever population that we're introducing to hospitality, we also understand that these skills are transferable and that the amount of jobs available in hospitality are wide. You were talking to someone who's living a hospitality career right now, right? And I started as a dishwasher. Right? Justice impacted individuals, we've talked about that. If you work with justice impacted individuals, you should talk with me. We do powerful, powerful things in prisons and in jails and corrections departments, and I'd love to talk to you about that as well. Right? We have a program called HOPES. You might want to write that down if that's an area that you'd like to talk about more. So, I think you're getting the idea here. Is there a need for hospitality workforce development? But that's my second question. Is there a need for it and workforce development support? There definitely is a need for workforce development support. Why? Because on the whole, as I travel the country right now, I'm in Chicago tomorrow, I'm in Atlanta by the end of the week, and then I'll be back here. On the whole, the current workforce development system is not optimally connected to hospitality. I'm going to say that sentence with all the words in the right place. On the whole, the current workforce development system is not optimally connected to the hospitality industry. Agree or disagree? If you agree, raise your hand. Right, we're not. In all of these meetings, when I say, do you know your state restaurant association? 2 people raise their hand. How many of you would like to have a great relationship with your state restaurant and hospitality association so that you could access their professional development? Yeah, right? So, We want to make that connection, right? The pandemic was unprecedented. We need your help. And by unprecedented, I mean it's not over, right? It's definitely not over for the hospitality industry. And this is why, even though we've reached sort of pre-pandemic levels of employment, right? All of the paradigms changed, right? How we train people, how many people are working on the floor, technology stacks in our restaurants, narratives about the industry in general, all of that has changed, right? And when we have a state where the workforce development system, Illinois would be a great example, right, is lockstep with hospitality, right, we're seeing huge impact on the ground, right? So, we've talked about that narrative, right? We've talked about how that narrative is a challenge within workforce development professionals. We've talked about how there are significant challenges within community colleges and frameworks of higher education. I can unpack that, but I won't. But if you are in higher education and you are in community college and you would like industry recognized certifications and upskilling in your programs and you would like apprenticeships in your programs, right? I'd love to talk, right? So what would that system achieve? Let's say we did that. Let's say Georgia said, oh my goodness, David, within 40 minutes, not even at 40 minutes yet, right? We did set up that system. What would the system look like? I did not have career pathway illumination available to me when I started my first hospitality job. I went in, I said, will you give me a job? Will you give me a job? I said, please, I'll do anything. I got the job. And since then, it's been a matter of merit, right? And doing the job that I was asked to do. I came from a very low socioeconomic background, right? So I didn't have access to industry recognized credentials. That's a huge part of what the workforce development community does when they articulate with hospitality. Most of the people who come into hospitality jobs that I hired as a manager were in no position to go to community college. I wasn't in a position to go to community college. I needed to pay rent this week. I needed food this week. Hospitality does that for people, right? But when we have an illuminated career pathway, when we have access to industry recognized credentials, those people who I have seen have that kind of access, boy, their upward economic mobility was a whole lot different than mine was over the last 30 years, right? And then we talked about that before, industry connection. We also need wraparound services. That's why I want to be friends with this group of people. We also need mentorship to the people that you bring in as a pipeline. That's why I think you want to be friends with me. And how many people in the room are connected to apprenticeship? Right? I'd love to talk with you about that at another time. I'm a senior subject matter for the Department of Labor for 6 hospitality registered apprenticeships, right? Line cook, there's also restaurant manager and kitchen manager, along with lodging manager, maintenance engineer, and a hotel cook. And those have been very powerful frameworks. Is this making sense to people? Is this sounding like good stuff to hear? Good. So again, what would an effective system achieve? And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to blow through this because I think most of you know this, but what are we trying to do? And I talked about that earlier. Who are we? Who are the stakeholders in an optimally connected hospitality workforce development system? If you are a systems thinker and in workforce development in Oregon, I would like you to give me a call and trade cards afterwards, right? Because most of the networks, when I come into a state and ask about hospitality workforce development, look like this. And then I ask a room and I say, who do you know in hospitality workforce development that you could get things moving? And people say, oh, well, I know myself, and I know a restaurant I go to, and there's generally not a large network. So if we sit around and we talk about who are the constituent players in a hospitality workforce development network, where it's connected like Georgia asked us to do, there's a lot of different groups of people who have an interest, who have a motivation, and when they're connected correctly, can really move the needle. But in most states I work in, when we're talking about hospitality workforce development, it looks like this. Does this look familiar? Right? How many of you could say that you have this going on with another industry, but it doesn't look this messy? Manufacturing, right? They got their workforce development going on, right? So this is often what we're presented with. My job is to come in and say, who's part of what group, right? Who's these people are public sector, these people are private sector. How do we figure out who the right people are? How do we create an inventory, right, that makes sense? But most importantly, right, once we've created that inventory, once we know who the players are, once we know what their capacity cards are, and honestly, this is the part where everything falls apart in most models where we try and build. It looks like that, or at best, like that, right? What we're trying to do is bring it to where we know who we are, we know what our capacity is, we know what part of the system that we play, right? We understand how the system works, right? And again, I see this all over the country where people everybody's at the table, but they really don't understand how to make a system that works. So let's think about that for a moment. How are we doing for time? What time is it? Can someone shout out the time?
3:38.
3:38, that's great. I thought I'd been talking for 2.5 hours. I'll take it. But does that system part make sense? I mean, that's my job, is to come in a lot of times and just be connective tissue. Right, Martha, do you know John? Martha's like, I am looking for 40 baskets, and I can't find 40 baskets. Nobody will find 40 baskets, and I've got 40 baskets, and she's walking around over there, and Jim is over here going, I got 40 baskets, I got to get rid of 40 baskets, right? That system, right? Because people don't like to poke their nose into other people's business, right? If I'm in VR, and I need to work with another organization, and I need to give them strong feedback on what they're doing wrong, or how they could be doing things differently, that's a difficult thing to do, right? So, systems, right? Who are the right people, right? Do you have the right people there, and do you understand the capacity and how we all work together? What are we trying to do? We talked about building a system, but I don't think there's anybody in the room who I've had a conversation with before, but if you've had a conversation with me, this is going to come out very quickly, meaningful impact, right? That's what we're trying to do, is create meaningful impact for individuals, right? I know that I've hired people who that power of that one job, Gavin is the guy I bring up a lot, but that made all the difference in the world, right? And we know that hospitality jobs often create meaningful impact, even when they're dishwasher jobs. They create impact for people, for workers in general, right? For employers, for sure. Hospitality employers are not aware of the workforce development system. How many of you work with employers who think that hospitality employers have any kind of idea of the resources that you can bring to their organizations? OJT hours, apprenticeship help. You know, what I hear from this crowd most often is, can you just put us in front of the employers so we can tell them what we can do for them, right? And then when we do that, those sticky notes are starting to arrange, right? The employers go, what? You can pay half wages for or whatever the program is? What, you've got a grant to look at, right? So that's super important to employers to make that connection with workforce development. And in turn, that makes a huge difference to communities. And I'm telling you right now that Dave Farrow, I'm going to brag a little bit, right, has come into communities, said, what are you doing for hospitality workforce development? They said, we don't really know. We arrange the sticky notes, we come up with a model, and we start to make a difference in communities, not just for employers, not just for workers, right, but for the entire community, right, which affects the regional economy. Ocean Shores is a great example up in Washington. Seabrook's a great example, right? I'm using Washington because that's where my house is. I should probably not talk about Washington down here in Oregon. But if you want to look at coastal Washington, who has looked at coastal Oregon for examples, I mean, they're following your lead, right? Because they've seen that a focus on hospitality in this area has affected the regional economy. And this is the part I like, it affects regional culture, right? I'm going to the Midwest tomorrow. Whoa, I love going to the Midwest. I love it. I mean, they're like, here's some fresh baked bread and some flowers, and we're just so happy to see you. It's a culture of hospitality, right? I don't know exactly where it comes from, but we know that when we focus on hospitality, and we focus on hospitality knowledge, skills, and abilities, specifically customer service, right? It affects the economy because people want to go there. They're attracting hundreds of thousands of people right now because of a focus on hospitality workforce development to southwestern Illinois. How many of you have ever thought, I want to go to the great vacation capital of southwestern Illinois? Right? They're making it happen, but it is taking a focus, right? So together we're trying to create meaningful impact, but again, we're trying to do it because that's what Georgia said I had to do, was do it systematically, right? Because if it doesn't happen systematically, it just happens like hospitality's been doing it for the last 1,000 years, by the seat of our pants. I went through an apprenticeship in hospitality, I just didn't know that that's what I was going through. Now, the paradigms are changing, we're formalizing, we're doing it systematically. Okay, here's my favorite part of this whole presentation. I get to talk about myself for about 5 minutes, all right? So hang tight. But I think this is important. I once went to a professional development on public speaking. And it may not seem like it, but I'm terrified right now. I'm always terrified. I brought my son to this conference. He can tell you I've been terrified for the last 4 hours. It's hard to get up in front of people and talk. But I think you should listen to me when it comes to hospitality workforce development, because that's me, David Farrell, right? This is a master's in public administration, which I'm extremely proud of, which means I have a grad degree in writing lists. Right? Does anybody else have an MPA in the room? Am I right? Right? And this is my customer service certification. And this means I'm a customer service expert. And as much as I love this one, I get a lot more currency out of this one. This has helped me more in my life. I don't, my MPA has helped, right? But my customer service certification is that skill. Some people call them soft skills. We'll talk about that in a second, right? But I like to point out that certification. I'm the senior manager of workforce development for the National Restaurant Association. I have also worked at a billion different restaurants all over the world. So I'm from Saskatchewan. Does anybody know where Saskatchewan is? Right? And there's a reason I'm telling you all this, not just because I really want to talk about myself. Right? I started out in Manitoba. That's where I started out, Swan River, Manitoba. Has anybody ever been to Swan River, Manitoba? Right? I'm waiting for, yeah, I've been to Swan River, Manitoba, right? Well, that's what it looks like in Swan River, Manitoba, right? So you can't run away in Swan River, Manitoba. People are like, we can still see you, right? And it's freezing cold most. Look it up. Swan River is a beautiful place, but if you want a contest and it was a week in Swan River, second prize would be 2 weeks in Swan River. Like it's very cold most of the year. I like that. It took just a couple seconds to be like, sucks that bad. All right. So, it was kind of like a warm bath. So the yellow is where people live in Canada. Yeah. That's where I live, right? So there was nothing going on there. Nothing going on. And my poor friends who are still in Swan River, they said, what do you mean there's nothing going on in Swan River? I mean, there's nothing going on in Swan River. So my parents were like, well, we've got to take our kids, take them to a better place, a little bit less isolated. So we went from Swan River to Saskatchewan. Has anybody ever been to Regina, Saskatchewan? Have you been to Saskatchewan? Right, it looks like that, right? And this is literally the road to my high school. I went to Luther College High School in Regina, Saskatchewan, and every morning we got on a road that looked like this most of the time. If it didn't look like this, it was like 95 degrees and sweltering hot, right? So guess what I did? What do you think I did?
Wow.
I left, right? And I went to the only place that was colder and more miserable, Alaska. And in Alaska, I got on a boat that looked exactly like this, and I became a fish processor. And if there's anything in the world that is going to make you look closely at a hospitality career, it's working on a processing deck. People are like, you fished in Alaska? That's so romantic. There's nothing romantic about it, except for, I'll age myself here, I did this in the late 80s and the early 90s, and I had money coming out of my ears, right? I was able to travel the world, and that's my point. I came back down from Alaska after working up there. Each one of those dots represents a restaurant that I worked at in the United States. Right? I went from restaurant to restaurant, from city to city. I could always get a job. What skill did I have that allowed me to go in and kill an interview and get a job as a server right away? Customer service. Right? Those soft skills. Then I took those skills and I worked in hospitality operations on all 7 continents, 60% of the map, 153 countries. Isn't that exciting? I always get really excited when I look at that, right? But so I got to climb in the Himalayas. I was being paid there. That's my Steve's picture I have. That is Steve is a Canadian term, but you get it, right? I look pretty Steve there, don't I? Right? That's in Antarctica. I'm being paid on hospitality's dime. Has anybody ever heard of Ernest Shackleton? Right? For a couple of years, I led people across South Georgia, following Ernest Shackleton's footsteps. Hospitality, right? I didn't work on that shit. Right? I don't know who did work on that shit, but they didn't have the training I had. Instead, I worked on the world's most exclusive cruise ship in the world. People pay to live in homes on this ship. The most expensive home on this ship is $33 million. There are 2 of them. It's all deck 7. The whites live on one side, and the people who I can't even say their name live on the other side, right? The only reason I tell you this is because this is no holds barred hospitality. One time in Antarctica, I had to hire an Argentinian airplane to fly back to Argentina to get blueberries, right? And so I only say this in that when you're dealing with this demographic, when you're dealing with customer service, when you're dealing with the expectations on this level, there's a certain set of knowledge, skills, and abilities that come with that kind of work, and I wouldn't call them soft skills, right? These are just a bunch of pictures of me doing hospitality, right? This was a fun one because I got to do other things too. Our ship also was a science ship, so I was the driver of the rescue boat. That meant I got to take world-renowned scientists, right, on scientific expeditions. Has anybody ever heard of Anoush Ansari? This is my best story. Right? Anoush Ansari is the first Iranian woman ever to go to the space station. She paid for it by herself. Guess who she called from the space station? You. Me. Right? Why? Because I was her waiter. Right? So this relationship that we have with the people who serve us, who make our beds in hotels, who bring hospitality to us, it's an important part of American culture, right? This is that ship. I probably put too many here. This is a horrible picture of me, but I'd like to put this up here. One of my jobs that I have, has anybody ever heard of a guest conversationalist? So I go on cruise ships around the world, and my job is to sit at the table with you and get you all talking, right? The average amount that I get paid to do that is the cost of the cruise plus a per diem. But the last cruise I did, I'm looking at you because of the look on your face, you're like, I want to do that too. Yeah, and if you want to do that, talk to me, right? If you've got customer service skills, if you can sit down with 4 liberals, 3 conservatives, and a guy from Texas, and keep it cool, right? And keep it cool, right? That's a skill, is it not? How many of you wish that your CEO had that skill in the boardroom? Right? Let's think about the people we work with. You know the people who were in hospitality at the beginning of their career, and you know the people who never touched a hospitality knowledge, skill, or ability in their life, right? But this is me after one of the absolute worst guest conferences, the Texan one. We'll just put it that way. So again, right? That's where I started. Those are the countries I visited, right? And it happened because of hospitality. Whoa, let's not. That's a really excited video, but we're not going to show it. We don't have time. Look at it, he's like, you said. Do not have time. Right? Why am I telling you this? It's because my whole life has been paid for by hospitality. I started out trying to be a rock star, right? Most people who try to be rock stars or actors end up really good waiters or chefs, right? So I kind of turned it on its nose. And you know, why listen to me? Because I started as a dishwasher, and I was part of a team in Ho Chi Minh City, right? It was part of an ambassador team to Ho Chi Minh City to help them start their Ministry of Hospitality. I started as a dishwasher. This is me setting up expeditions in Madagascar. I put the loom on my shoulder so that people believed that we were there. But I went to Madagascar, stayed there for almost a month. Hospitality's done, right? I started as a dishwasher, right? This is me running one of the many restaurants that I've run in my life. I love doing it. I had a girlfriend ask me, not a girl, I'm married, but I had a girlfriend ask me last night, are you fulfilled doing what you're doing right now? And I said, yeah, but the best job I've ever had is going from table to table throwing little parties, right? It's your 50th anniversary, sorry, gotta go. Sorry, gotta go. You can walk away from the conversations, it's fantastic, right? But this is as happy as I've ever been in my life. Hospitality career pathway, right? I started as a dishwasher. But this is a hospitality career pathway. This is St. Patrick's Center in St. Louis. This is a group of people that we're putting together. Now we have 5 powerful apprenticeships happening in hotels in St. Louis for people who are just as impacted and homeless. That's a hospitality career. I started as a dishwasher. Whoa. Right? This is me on Route 66. Right? I have this awesome group of people along Route 66, Great Rivers and Roots Tourism, right? We talked about them before, who are going business to business and giving their employees the knowledge, skills, and abilities they need to success, to talk about Route 66, to talk about the area, and to build out southwestern Washington. And I'm telling you what, I also met with a couple mayors, I also met with a couple economic development councils. They like the Benjamins, LTAX, everybody knows what LTAX is, right? Yeah, it's going through the roof in the 5-county area around Collinsville. I started as a dishwasher, right? So I also get to testify. I love that. I don't even remember testifying when I testify. I always feel so special doing it that I'm like, what happened, right? Did I do okay?
But this is a powerful, powerful position, I feel, to be in. To stand up on behalf of hospitality workers. This was when I was the director of the Education Foundation in Washington, and say, hey, I started as a dishwasher. I'd love if you went to my website and looked at that testimony. I started as a dishwasher. We need the support of the public sector, right? Because we are a powerhouse in the American economy, we're a powerhouse in our regional economy, and you know what? People don't leave Western Washington or Western Oregon. I was going to say talking about the trees, but they do leave talking about the trees. Let me back up. They leave talking about the hosts. I was just in New Orleans. Who did I talk to? My wife. What happened in New Orleans? Oh, this lady behind the desk. She gave me extra cookies. I love double. Anybody like double cheese cookies? Right? But is that hospitality, right? But I came back and talked about her. I was up in Port Angeles, about to take the ferry across, sitting in a restaurant. Right? What should I do around here? When you go somewhere and you want to know who likes to go to Hawaii, right? Yeah. And you ask that front desk person, where's the secret place? Right? And they tell you, and you remember that, right? So, you should listen to me because I have 35 years in the industry and a lot of Boy Scout badges, etc., etc., etc. But you should listen to me because I started as a dishwasher, right? That's why I think you should listen to me. And because I've got a lot of stories to tell about it, and the power of the story is huge. And so I would ask you to ask yourselves, what's the hospitality story for workers in your area, for employers in your area? We've talked about this, I'm revisiting it, because it's different in every area. You know, people always ask me, my boss, my VP, she's like, I want you to make a model that's replicable, that can work in every corner of America. And I'm like, well, have you met a workforce development council before? If you've met one, you've met one, right? They're all different. If you've met one economic development council, if you've met one high school teacher, right? Christian, I just realized I haven't used a microphone once. Sorry about that. Right? But a region's hospitality story says a ton about where we live. Right? This will just be so exclusive, man. I feel like you should have been there. So what's the story in your region?
I'll give you my boss's number to talk.
Yeah, you can. David doesn't listen. What is the story in your region? I'll tell you this. When we drove through Oregon yesterday, I brought my son. If you see some little kid walking around the hotel, I'll leave it at that. He was enthralled by one. And he's from Washington. Right? We stopped at McMenamins. He wanted to go there. Didn't know why, but he heard about it, wanted to go there. And he's like, it's so lush. It's so beautiful. It's so cool. Guess who he remembers from this entire trip? Across the street from McMenamins, there's a great ice cream shop. If you've been there, that's who he's going to be talking about. The guy who treated him like $1 million from behind the counter. That's the story of the region, right? So when we talk about, well, you know, we really don't want little Leo, that's my kid to be a hospitality professional. My parents didn't say that when I was in second grade. We really hope David becomes a waiter. Right? But my parents sure talk about my career now, right? We sure talk about the people who have succeeded in hospitality, and it's not for everybody, right? But for those of us who have it in our DNA, it's an extremely rewarding career path, right? So, are there collaborators available in your region? What does that mean, right? I used to say we build collaborative networks, right? I don't say that anymore. I say we build strong collaborative networks. Because lots of times people come to the table and they say, that's a great idea. And their fingers kind of, you done it for? They're pointing across the table at you. That's a great idea that you're going to do, right? We talked about those capacity cards before. Come with your capacity cards laminated and with a real understanding of what you can do. So when we throw them on the table, right, we have a strong collaborative effort. What does that mean? It just means that word. That's the sticky note I want you to put up. Hospitality workforce development requires championship right now. It just requires champions. What does a champion mean? It means that I did this presentation probably 18 times in a row, right? That's my role as a champion, to effectively communicate to you. What's your role as a champion? I don't know what your role is, but you're either champion or you're not, right? And I'm not saying you have to be for hospitality. Some people like, isn't this funny? My little kid Leo, who's here with me, hates going to restaurants, right? I'm like, oh, that's going to be difficult given what I do for a living, right? But he's never going to be a champion for it. If you're a champion for it, we need hospitality employee champions, we need educational champions, legislative champions, community-based organizations. How many people are from a community-based organization? Right? I can't tell you how many times the difference between one of my employees succeeding or not was because I bought them an alarm clock, or I bought them shoes for cruising. Those community-based wrapper, if they aren't part of the model, don't do it. Don't do hospitality workforce development if you are not working in tandem with a community-based organization who understands the needs of your, because the restaurant managers don't understand the needs. Really awesome ones like me do, but there are a lot of restaurant managers out there who just want people to show up, come to work, and do the do, right? And so for us to take those people from opportunity populations who didn't have the same kind of upbringing and education that I did, get them restaurant ready, get them hospitality ready, get them certified restaurant professional training, right? So they've got all the knowledge, skills, and abilities, they're doing well, but they just don't understand how to wake up on time. They just don't understand some of these other skills that are important. So we need champions, and then this is probably my favorite thing I'm going to show you today. Let's go back. If we had the right people at the table, it means we can provide, and I've highlighted this word, access to information, access to those illuminated pathways, credentials, right? Mentorship, to apprenticeships, to continuing professional development, to case management, to supportive services, and to good jobs, right? But let's go back. What's the one word that's really important? Access. And that's what this room of people provides, right? You have people coming to you through whatever pathway they come to. And when David hitchhiked from Regina, Saskatchewan to Chicago to get a job at Hyde Park as a dishwasher at the Medici, a pizza place right by the University of Chicago, right? I did not have this. I did not have that. I didn't have this. I didn't even know what that meant, right? That started in Chicago for me because I found a mentor, right? But it wasn't formalized. If I could have done an apprenticeship out of high school, right? If one of your crowd had somehow connected with me and said, hey, you know what, David, your teachers are telling us that, maybe college isn't the best thing for you to do right away, and it wasn't, right? But that's where the sentence ended for me. Maybe you should leave, right? Honestly, that was pretty much the conversation with David. I'm much more cleaned up than I was then, right? But if someone had said, hey, come into our restaurant, the National Restaurant Association is going to pay for all your related training and instruction, right? We're going to mentor you, and when you come out of this, you're going to have industry recognized credentials where you can get a job anywhere in the world. And older Dave Farrell is going to get you a job on a cruise ship, making $90,000 a year as a sous chef. Nobody ever did that for me, right? I was like, oh, cool, I can buy bread, right? And that is where a lot of entry-level hospitality workforce development is happening. So if you don't understand that, the populations that you typically deal with, and I don't know if that's a fair thing to say, that's our pipeline, right? And so when workforce development says, well, we want to take these groups of people and we want to put them in STEM, and I'm not denigrating that. I'm just saying they are coming to hospitality anyway, and they need your attention inside of that. They are a large part of the workforce that I feel doesn't get the same amount of attention from workforce development communities, right, as some of the other industries. Now, I'm not going to go into salaries and wages and everything right now because that's a huge ball of wax, but I can tell you that my 17-year-old son is in Running Start, will have his associate's degree in culinary by the time he graduates from high school, and if he wanted to be a regional manager of a national chain or, making $90,000 a year, I would say 3 to 4 years, right? Earning while he's learning, right? Instead of David, who went to grad school. Anybody who's been to grad school knows that you weren't earning while you were learning, probably, right? So it means organizations that can provide meaningful partnerships, right? My role is to build bridges, just like we're doing today, between workforce development agencies, state restaurant associations. Who has a booth out here? If you do anything, go out, give me your card, and say, let's talk later, right? Powerful association and community-based organizations. So, how are we doing on time? Can someone just yell it out?
4:02.
4 o'clock, 4:02. So, I'll fly through this. We've talked about this. If you give me your card and we meet later on, we're going to talk about what the industry career path looks like so that you can illuminate that for people. We're going to talk about industry recognized credentials, right? And we're going to talk about where these credentials align with the industry. I go every year to Chicago, and the military takes their best and brightest food service workers. Really, they have judges that go all across the country. If you win that competition, you get to spend 3 days with me in Chicago, going through this type of experience. But what we're doing is we're taking military food service and we're putting them through a transition program so that they can, if they want to stay within food service, go into commercial food service. So again, when we work with workforce development, we want to make sure we have program alignment. We want to make sure that wherever a person is on that particular, I would call this illuminated career pathway, that they also understand, because this is where KISS does, right? What industry recognized credentials attend that? And when we start talking about building a system together, I think this is where some of you will become really interested, right? Where are my particular people, my particular pipeline, where do they fall, right? If we're dealing with a WEO youth grant, which we did here in Oregon once, we focused on work readiness, right? When we're doing transitional skills, when we're doing incumbent worker, we're in this area. I can speak WIOA. I would love to speak WIOA with you at a later time and talk more specifically about where this slots in, right? We heard from workforce development, we need to understand what that career path looks like. So what the National Restaurant Association has done is divided our certifications into restaurant professional, restaurant supervisor, and restaurant manager. I can unpack how these are delivered, but these are delivered through a Serve Success program. And these are also the RTI, or part of the RTI for the apprenticeships. So one of the things that we've done over the last 5 years in the National Restaurant Association is even if you're starting with an initial certification just to upskill, Guest Service Gold, which we'll talk about in a second, right? That's going to support in a stackable way, right? All the way up to advanced degrees, right? We want to make sure that you're not paying twice, so to speak, right? That's what that looks like. And they're competency based. I was part of the build of these, as I was with the apprenticeships as well. If someone comes into my restaurant and says, I'm a certified restaurant professional from the National Restaurant Association, I'm like, do you want my job, right? They're a powerful program, right? So, we do professional workshops, online learning suites and courses for a lot of people right now. For my son, he would rather just do he went through half of high school doing it online, right? And so that paradigm has really changed. We're making that online platform available to any of the groups or students who like that. We have the interactive study guides, and again, those professional certifications really mean something when people are going into the interview. We also have our Restaurant Hospitality and Leadership Center. Right? You can tell at the beginning of this presentation that I was doing a lot of preaching. Now I'm filling it in with all the facts, right? So these are the programs. Our Restaurant and Hospitality Leadership Center is extremely important because what they do is we hold your hand through apprenticeships from soup to nuts. So if you wanted an apprenticeship at David's House of Pancakes, right, and you got in touch with the Restaurant Hospitality Leadership Center, until you're finished having that apprenticeship instituted in David's House of Pancakes, our leadership center is, and I'm part of that group. We're going to do crosswalk validations with you. Does everybody know what a crosswalk validation is? Right? If you own a restaurant and you want to have an apprenticeship there, you're going to get on the phone with me or someone from my team, and we have over 400 different competencies that we're going to check with you. Do you teach this? Do you teach this? If you cover 80% of those competencies, I'm legally allowed to validate you as of the Department of Labor, and you can have Department of Labor ratified apprenticeships, right? And so this is a real resource to any organization that would like to start apprenticeships. And I said there's 6 of them, soon to be 2 more that we just built, and they cover all areas of the hospitality ladder, right? Everybody knows what a registered apprenticeship is. I'm telling you, the apprentices that I've had in my restaurants, it's night and day, right? If I just hired you off the street to come in and be a server or a line cook, that's one thing. If you come in and you've got a line cook apprenticeship, I know that retention is there for at least 18 to 24 months, right? I used to use it as a recruitment tool. That if you just advertise line cook, right, and then sort of look at who shows up for those interviews, and you advertise line cook apprenticeship, right, you get a whole different kind of people showing up for that, right? And it made a huge difference in the restaurants that I ran. Again, it's part of the RTI, is part of this career path, which is really important. The RTI is also covered by the National Restaurant Association. So that apprenticeship that you're doing at David's House of Pancakes, $1,500 worth of related training and instruction. I like to say, I'm going to cover it for you, but that's a complete lie. I don't cover any of it. But the National Restaurant Association Education Foundation does, like many other associations do, right? So how has this worked? I told you earlier about AvTech up in Seward, Alaska, because I called the DOL, ended up speaking with the governor. They gave us a bunch of money to go up and do boot camps at AvTech, which is a vocational school, right? It was a fantastic event. What happened? This is our first cohort that we had, right? We ran them through 3 days. They got what I told you about before. On the first day, they got front of the house service and communication, front of the house basic operations. And this is intense. This is 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon, right? And it's hard for this particular population to sit there and do that. So we really got to bring it, right? But hopefully we do. Back of the house production, right? And basic business operations, and that virtual job fair that I told you about, right? Everyone was hired. The only one that wasn't hired was the guy who got hit by a car the night before. Yeah, he wasn't hurt that bad, but he was right? And I'll tell you one thing. If you ever want to do a statewide virtual job fair, and you think you can start setting it up at 4 in the morning, you're wrong, you can't, right? And if you're gonna do it on 7 different computers with different Zoom, you're wrong. I would highly recommend that people look into the multiple different platforms that are available for virtual job fairs. But anyway, this is a model I would love to talk to anybody in the room with about, unpack more. This is something we bring up to Alaska now every quarter, and now we're holding it at Covenant House in Alaska. And so we're taking homeless youth, right? We're taking kids who are coming out of foster care, and guess who's showing up at these boot camps now? Bankers. Hey, could we send our teller crew through your customer service training that you're doing at Covenant House? We had a construction, she's the person who answers the phone for a construction company. Could we run her through your customer service training, right? Huge transferable skills that are happening in Anchorage, Alaska because we jumped onto this program, right? So now the next question is, you notice I got little airplanes? This is a Google map. Has anybody ever made a Google map before? Like My Maps? It's so fun, right? You get a huge spreadsheet of addresses, you just upload it, and then it just puts it everywhere. Well, this is the 509 workforce development councils in the country, right? And I'm trying to fly a plane to each one of them, right? Who am I trying to connect with? I'm trying to connect with regional employers. I'm trying to connect with workforce development professionals. Isn't this clever? I came up with this on my own. State restaurant associations and hospitality champions and community-based organizations. But that's what I'm trying to do, right? And when I fly into Atlanta, this is who I'm meeting with at the end of the week, right? I'm flying into Chicago. I'm meeting with state apprenticeship directors and workforce development professionals at the WIOA conference in Collinsville, Illinois. I hope to see all of you there. Right? What's the cargo? This is what we're doing in southwestern Illinois. It started because of one program. We got one small grant. We decided to do a cohort of 10 people, customer service training. One of them was a CEO from Chamber of Commerce, right? She said, this was amazing because it really is an empowering program. And in fact, little plug for Oregon, it's called Guest Service Gold Tourism, but Guest Service Gold Tourism is because of the Hospitality Association and Education Foundation here in Oregon. I mean, if you're teaching customer service training, you couldn't be in a better state than Oregon in terms of the support that they have and the expertise that they also have within their organization. So we set up this model in southwestern Illinois. I told you I'm going there tomorrow, right? In March alone, we sold 200, I say we sold, we used a grant, but we did 220 customer service certifications in a 5-county region. I go there tomorrow to meet with WIOA. We hope it happens to the whole state. If you were to talk to Tony Furman or to Derek, who runs Old Harold Brewery, who ran his whole staff through the program, he would tell you that the most important graph for him after that training that happened was revenue, right? So we can directly tie this kind of modeling in an area to revenue, and I talked about that before, right? So hospitality workers, employers across the United States need your partnership, right? We need to move the needle on that. You know, everybody in workforce development says, yeah, we want to dance with hospitality. Hospitality says, I'm too busy doing dishes, right? And it doesn't happen. We need that cooperation, right? We need rapid training models, right? Because a lot of the people who are coming into hospitality, when I talk with colleges, I know we're getting near He's like, you said you're gonna be done early, and you completely lied to all of us, all right? But I hope it's worthwhile, right? They're creating results across the country, but when we talk about hospitality and workforce development, the main point of articulation is at that line level employee. So that's where the discussion's really. It doesn't mean we can't do, I'll tell you a story. I got fired. At the beginning, fired is the wrong word. I got let go at the beginning of the pandemic along with millions and millions and millions of hospitality workers across the country, right? And the day before that happened, I would have told you that I could make 5 phone calls across the world and I got 5 job offers by the afternoon, and that was true. The next morning, that wasn't true for Western Washington, for Western United States, for the United States, for North America, for everybody lost their job. Jeannie House from Pack Mountain Workforce Development was the first person to call me after I lost my job. I never met her before in my life. She said, "Ham, from Workforce Development, I heard you lost your job," because I applied for unemployment, so yes, it's not, your systems work. It works. And that's why I'm here today, really, because of the power of your system, right? I got kids, I got a mortgage, I had a professional job. Boom, right? Your systems that you guys run and build were the systems, right? You're creating results across the country, right? We need you to do it with hospitality as much as possible. So what does it look like in real life? We talked about that, 3-day events. I'm going to go through this because we already pretty much described it. But an example of this would be what we did in southwestern Illinois, 3 days. We do the guest service gold. Are we teaching, how many people hear that all the time? Employers really need soft skills. I would like to offer that you never use that word again. I would like you to call them power skills, because it is a fact, right? I have trained hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people around the world with hospitality, knowledge, skills, and abilities. I can soft skills. I taught power skills, right? You're screaming at me because your halibut isn't right, and it's your birthday, and you've been waiting forever, and I'm 19, and you remind me of a teacher I had once who frightened me, right? But workforce development put me through guest service school, and I understand recovery, and I understand my role, right? I understand last, right? I'm going to listen, I'm going to apologize, I'm going to solve your problem, and I'm going to thank you for coming, right? And you're going to go, damn, right? He's only 19, right? But then I'm going to take that to when I become a counselor, or a psychologist, or a husband. She'd say he never has ever done that in our entire relationship. Right? But those power skills are important. Recovery, passion, personalization, commitment, inclusion, knowledge, personality. If you had asked me to invent a customer service training program as a white male American, they wouldn't have been this, right? It would have been a lot dumber and a lot less effective, but the good people who put this program together are teaching your people in your hospitality organizations about authenticity. Delight, I love that one, right? That's what happened in the ice cream store for my kid. He was delighted. It was a 19-year-old guy who did that, right? Also, they get this. What did I point at today? I'm this guy. Look at my certificate, right? It means something. And if you put that in front of me at an interview, right, job's over. It means I cared enough, or someone cared enough about me to make sure that I could deliver those knowledge, skills, and abilities we talked about. So they get the certification. We put them through an orientation to the certified restaurant professional, and this is just one model that I'm describing. Everything can be different in time, right? But this allows them to, again, get that online platform that augments their skills, right? Resume and interview skills, industry networking and job fair, got the results we got before. And the best models are multi-sector collaboration. So I'm going to fly through this last part and then we're done, right? Let's focus on that for a second. Right, when you think public sector workforce development, are the first words you think energy and buzz? Okay? No. When you think public sector, you don't think energy and buzz. But when you think about your own communities, your workforce development professional communities, you know there is energy and buzz. You know things do happen. Oh, we got a $500,000, coastal hospitality grant. Energy and buzz, right? Hey, we did a cohort of 10 people at Lane County Workforce Development, and they were empowered and excited about that energy and buzz, right? So they require that energy and buzz so that that connective tissue that we talked about before right, actually takes hold, right? That we don't just talk about collaborating, we do it, right? So state restaurant associations, they're there for you. Workforce development councils, that's me mansplaining to you about what you all do it well, right? Workforce development program supervisors, these are my best friends, right? Because you're making the hard decisions on the ground about what programs, right, are really going to work in your region, right? I love this one here because this area that I'm going in Southwest Washington, some of you may want to talk about this, they developed a hospitality apprenticeship for developmentally disabled students, and they're on their third cohort right now. I do give a presentation on that. I end up with like tears in my eyes at the end of that all the time. Talk about empowering, right? So economic development councils, chambers of commerce, you get it. This is the multi-sector network that we need to put together, right? And I just really wanted to remind you, right? Academics can be really, really important. I find that the academics who are in my community are the people who are continually telling me what I'm not doing correctly, right? And that's really important to have a black hat, right? Best models are these multi-sector collaborations. So I'd invite you, what does that look like in your region, right? I told you what we're doing in Covenant House. These are the bubbles, right? I need a pipeline. I need people to train that pipeline, right? I need someone to make sure that that's a relevant curriculum, right? We need community-based organizations to provide wraparound services so that we create meaningful impact so that we can do these things, right? So imagine with me, these are all kids that ChatGPT invented for me. Isn't that cool? These are all generated, but they all look like kids that I've hired before, right? This is my kid right now, just got a job at Chipotle, his first job, right? And he's excited. He's not expecting it to be a, his career at Chipotle, but he's excited to be there. And what might happen is he loves to cook. He's gonna seek promotion, right? And then what's gonna happen maybe is what happened to me. I started to see it as a craft. I love 50-year anniversaries. That's my craft, right? I can make it better for you if you come sit at my table. You're gonna remember it, right? And once I realized I could do that, I realized I could teach people how to do that. And that became empowering for me. And then some of my friends who are on a hospitality career path went down an entrepreneurial line and opened up their own place. Workforce development is huge in supporting entrepreneurs, right? This is not my uncle, but it could have been my uncle, who was a night auditor at the Hilton in Phoenix, Arizona, for his entire career. His entire career, happy guy, right? Some become sous chefs, some become HR professionals. I can't tell you how many people that I've worked with in hospitality moved out of hospitality into HR, right? It's a people business, right? Some of them become entrepreneurs who own Whistler, right? 9 in 10 restaurants have fewer than 50 employees. So if you hear your boards talking about lip service to small business, we are a small business. You cannot talk about American small business and supporting the small business workforce without talking about restaurants, right? 41% of restaurant firms are owned by minorities, compared to 30%, right? So if you're a workforce development professional and your boards are saying we need to support efforts that support women and minorities, and then they say, but not hospitality, there's incongruence there, right? And I'd like you to point that out to them in front of everybody, like this. You're wrong, right? Right? Wages are something that, I had a person stand up at a conference and just nail me on wages, right? That's not my lane, but I will tell you this. That's a big discussion what hospitality wages really are, right? And so when people start talking about hospitality wages, just make sure that you've got the full deck of cards there, right? I'm not saying one thing or another because it's a huge issue. Just make sure you have the full deck of cards, right? We talked about this beginning, everybody raise their hands, right? Become part of this, help us train, in a way that creates meaningful impact. Because we're billions of dollars in the American economy. We have 500,000 jobs, right, that are available, right? But again, you've got David Farrow hitchhiking from Saskatchewan to Chicago, showing up at the Medici, right, with very little support from any public systems, right? Very, very little support. So if you do one thing today, walk out of here going, maybe I can support hospitality workforce development, right? And help create meaningful impact for it. I mean, look at where we are. You've touched hospitality all day. How many people got a cup of coffee or tea? Right? How many people stayed at the hotel? How many people got their gas filled? How many people went to a convenience store? How many went to a restaurant? Right? But they are we are. It's me. We're a little bit invisible, right? And I always tell people the best servants are invisible, and I use the word servant with my whole heart. Hospitality has allowed me to be a servant, right? And I love being a servant, right? But if I leave one message with all of you, create meaningful impact for hospitality workers in Oregon in any way that you can, if you think that you're a champion, right? Look at those challenges, ask the questions, call me and say, here's some next steps, and if you want to do that, that's how you can call me. Did we slide it by 4:30? Did I make it?
You're so, I mean, you're before 4:30.
Wow, that is stunning, because when I did it this afternoon, it was 4.5 hours, so I'm so happy. Right. Thank you. We have 7 minutes if anybody did want to ask questions. I'll tell you what I'd really like. I'd love for you to hand me a business card, right, so I can reach back out to you. I would love to have a conversation further down the line with anybody who would like to unpack some of this. I'd like you to know that I can bring rapid upskilling to whatever population you're talking about. I can be a real resource when it comes to hospitality apprenticeships. And lastly, go meet the Oregon Hospitality Association. They're really, really great. Yes, sir.
So I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't introduce the Orla staff who are in the room today.
I was hoping you
But we have 2 staff members joining us. We have Rebecca Donnelly, who was recently just hired to serve as the sector strategist through a Department of Labor award to Lane Workforce Partnership to support hospitality and leisure along the Oregon coast. So once again, if you're interested in hospitality and leisure, please get a chance to meet with Rebecca. Orla is tabling out in the lobby. We also have Ella with us. And Ella, remind me of your role.
Oh yeah, I'm the workforce development coordinator, so I kind of focus on building those bridges as well across the whole state of Oregon.
And so in terms of Dave's point around building these collaborations, finding the energy that's being built, we do have a kick-ass statewide association, and I think it's important for us to make those contacts.
I'm so happy you said that. Thank you so much. And this is an incredible group of people. And Oregon's an incredible state. I mean, how many people don't take that for granted in Oregon, right? Yeah, I mean, you live in a state that people from all over the world want to come visit. You know, when I was driving down from Lincoln City, my kid kept saying over and over again, this is just bucket list, Dad. This is So thank you for coming today. I really appreciate that you stayed for the whole time. And just know that everyone in this room is bucket list. And I'd love to talk to you all again. Thank you so much.